Okay. Good.
How long have you been doing this then?
I have been interviewing people for over 5 years. I'm a personal historian.
Oh, okay.
And so I do people's life stories.
Okay.
And so I thought when they needed more interviewers for the Veterans History Project, I thought, I could do that. I'd be good at that. So you're just the third one I've actually conducted.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway.
In this vein, yeah.
Yeah, in this vein, right, exactly. So maybe we'll save, let's start out a little bit. Today is August 20th, 2008. My name is Deb Moore, and I'm working through Grand Valley State University interviewing Fay Johnson for the Veterans History Project. Well, thanks for agreeing to do this, Fay. We
No problem.
appreciate it. Why don't you tell me a little bit about where you grew up, your early background?
I grew up right here.
Right here in,
This was my
Cascade?
grandfather's farm here.
okay,
You know, the house, the old house is over there across
Uh-huh.
Cascade Road. Our son lives in there now.
okay,
You know, we really originally we were down on Reeves Lake, down on the end of Reeves Lake, down the swamp. We moved out here in 1938, I think.
okay,
Back onto the farm.
uh-huh,
And we had the farm till I went into the service.
okay.
And that was in 43.
And tell me, what school did you go to?
Well, I went to East Grand Rapids
Mm-hmm.
for 6 grades. Went to Bretton Downs
Oh, did ya?
for 3 grades till the 8th grade.
Uh-huh,
Then went back to East Grand Rapids for 3 years. And then I went to Lowell for 1 year.
okay,
Because this was in what was in the Martin School District.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lowell school bus came through this area.
okay,
And to go to East Grand Rapids High School, I had to hitchhike to school. I did that for 3 years, and I'd sit out there in the rain and hitchhike, and the Lowell school bus would go the other way. Oh, well, this is ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
I might as well hop on the Lowell school bus and transfer to Lowell. So
Uh-huh.
that's what we did.
okay, okay. Because Forest Hills had no schools at that time.
No, this is long before Forest Hills was
Yeah,
developed.
yeah, okay.
Because this was back in 1943.
So you graduated from Lowell in 1943?
Graduated Lowell High School in 1943.
Okay, so then what happened? How did you get drafted or volunteer, or what did you do?
No, my birthday, I was 18 in September
Mm-hmm,
in 43. And I started out at CC down at community college.
okay,
You know, and just everybody was going in the service, and it seemed like the thing to do, so I volunteered to go into the Navy. Went into the Navy in November of 43.
so you didn't have any questions about volunteering? It was
No.
just,
No, you know, people don't really quite comprehend the feeling of the country back then, because
Tell me about
it was
that.
quite a bit different. You know, everybody was so involved in the war.
mm-hmm,
You know, there was, you know, we were going to win the war. That was all there was to it. And there was no question about it.
mm-hmm,
And everywhere you went, everybody was gung ho. Even the women, everybody else were volunteering for everything.
mm-hmm,
You know, even being a serviceman during the war was, you know, wherever you'd go, you were treated royally.
mm-hmm,
Even like when we take these truce transports back and forth across the country, the women would meet you at the train with cookies. And I went to school at Hugh Manley High School for one of my service schools,
uh-huh,
and the women would come to the window. You should meet my Rosa. She's such a lovely girl. And offer us cookies and people just couldn't have been nicer to you.
uh-huh.
You know,
Just the whole
servicemen-
feeling.
You know, their servicemen today really miss that. You know, people, how much the people appreciate what you're doing.
I'm sorry, you said you signed up for the Navy.
Yep.
And then tell me, where did you go?
Well, the Navy sent me with its infinite wisdom. They sent me to Farragut, Idaho, to
Okay.
boot camp,
Uh-huh.
which is up in the northern, not too far from Glacier National Park.
Yeah.
It's on Lake Coeur d'Alene.
Uh-huh.
It was actually on Lake Pend Oreille.
Uh-huh.
There's a state park there now at the old Navy base.
Uh-huh.
Went there.
Took a train there.
Yeah, took 6 weeks training there. Then they of course the Navy gives you all the aptitude tests that figures out what they want you to do. I want to do one thing and they want me to do another, and they sent me into radio tech school.
Okay.
So I went to radio tech school in Chicago at the Hugh Manley High School, and that was I don't remember how long it was, maybe a 6-week period or something. Then I graduated from that, and they sent me to Gulfport, Mississippi, to advanced radio tech school.
Okay.
And I flunked one of the courses they gave me, so they made me repeat it. When I repeated it, I didn't get a good enough grade. I passed it on the repeat, but I was supposed to do 2 points, and I only did 1 or something. So then they transferred me to fire control school,
Oh.
which was back in Great Lakes. So then I went to fire control school in Great Lakes.
Okay.
And graduated from fire control school, then I was assigned to the USS Terry in, I don't know what it was, oh gosh, the time kind of goes, like I said, 43, 40, probably in November or December of 44.
So you've already been in the service now for over a year?
Yeah, in service schools.
Okay.
Mhm.
And now you said that they wanted you to be a radio guy, but
Radio
what did you
technician.
want to do?
Well, I'm not neat enough with things. First thing we had to do, we had to design a radio from scratch. So like to go through the gain and loss of electrons in vacuum tubes and all this sort of thing, and design this radio. Then we had to have this radio built, and we had to be able to get this little radio station that was next door. Well, I had my radio built. My radio looked fine, except the guy said to me, he said, "My God, Johnson, this thing looks like a rat's nest. You know, you can't build a radio. I feel the wires were just going all scrambled around." That's the way I do it. It worked, he said, but he said, "I have no idea how it works. It would be impossible to ever repair it if it went bad." So that was where I really got in trouble with them.
Uh-huh.
I just wasn't neat enough.
Okay.
For fire control was more mechanical.
And what kind of fire might you control?
Gunfire.
Gunfire.
Well, I was a computer operator.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Well, the Navy had a computer designed to, all your guns on your ship are remotely controlled from a main battery director. So this computer would estimate all the things that you had to do to determine where to put the shell in the air to hit the airplane. Like an airplane is traveling, your ship is moving and rolling. You have to compensate for all these things with this computer to determine where to put the shell up here so it would burst in the airplane or run into it.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So it was called it was a massive thing, about half the size of this dining room table. It was called a Mark I computer. It had a gyro with it to stabilize it, so you had to establish an artificial horizon because the ship would be rolling, and you had to keep these guns moving so they were actually horizontal while the ship moved or
Okay.
stable. And it was interesting. You had a lot of things. You had to consider your own ship's speed and ship's course, and the velocity of the shell that you were using, and the bore of the gun, how much the gun was worn, because you had to compensate for that as you kept firing rounds, and the different types of shells that you were using, and the airplane's speed and the airplane's course and your ship's course and speed, because you're both moving and put the shell out there.
So did you have to take like a lot of math classes for that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it sounds pretty technical.
Yeah, we had a slide rule class we had to go to. I still got the old log dusty trick slide rule down in the basement someplace. I get that out, show the grandchildren what a modern computer looks like.
Right.
They laugh at me.
Right. So did you enjoy that work?
Yeah, really did. That was really great. You know, I learned a lot. I've always been really impressed with the Navy service schools from that standpoint. Because, you know, I used that knowledge quite a lot, even in business. Because I would do wiring and stuff at the plating company, and we'd have to, you know, and I understood electronics pretty well. With the two backgrounds, I could handle it.
Because of that training in the
Yeah.
Navy. Yeah.
I thought Navy had fabulous training. I always thought the service schools were great.
So when you were in service school, Fay, during this time, you'd go to school like 8 hours a day?
No.
No.
12, 14 hours.
12, 14 hours a
Yeah,
day.
you would.
Okay. So that was your main,
Yeah.
obviously your
That's
main
all
focus.
you did. You'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to class, and you'd be done at 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, so there was no time for goofing off? Or,
Well, you had weekends off usually. But that's about it.
Yeah. What were the guys doing the weekends?
Well, with Chicago was great duty.
Yeah.
Because you could go to town.
Yeah.
But, you know, in Great Lakes the same way. I'd come home when I went to Great Lakes. I'd come home on weekends.
Yeah, that worked
You'd
out nice for you.
Well, you'd take the train downtown to Chicago, and then take the electric out to Michigan City, Indiana, and then you hitchhike home. You could make better time hitchhiking than you could by train.
Yeah.
Because the Pure Marquette Railroad, they ran a train. We could catch that milk run, but it would take it forever because it stopped at every town between here and Chicago.
Yeah.
So, but you'd hitchhike back and forth, and
Yeah.
you'd get along good.
Yeah.
Hitchhiking was no problem because everybody.
They knew you were in the service. You had your uniform on?
Well, yeah, you had to wear a uniform.
Yeah.
Back during the war, you didn't have any civilian clothes.
Okay.
Civilian clothes were taboo, you know.
Yeah.
You know, everybody wore a uniform, even on Liberty or anything else.
Yeah. Okay. So you were identified who you were. Now here it says Well, did you have a unit and a division?
Well, the fire control is part of what you call the ordnance.
Uh-huh.
And there's the fire control, the gunner's mates, and the torpedo man. Well, that's the gunnery department.
Mm-hmm.
You're assigned. That's your division on your ship.
Okay.
You know, you're just part of that group.
Okay. So you get on the USS Terry.
I was on USS Terry
Where did you board that?
in San Francisco.
Okay.
Boy, we got on the USS Terry in, I think, probably November, approximately.
Mm-hmm.
We went overseas. We went to Inuit, joined the invasion fleet for Iwo Jima.
Okay.
We went to Iwo Jima.
Mm-hmm.
And we went at Iwo. There's a lot of different engagements. We were mainly, our main objective was for fire control by pre-invasion and for the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have this map of Iwo on your computer, and you have that thing all squared off in squares,
Mm-hmm.
and each square had a number on it.
Mm-hmm.
And you were designed to put your shells in this square.
Okay.
And you would do that, and then we had a liaison on the shore, a Marine lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
And he would tell us where our shells were landing, and he would call fire for it. He'd call for like 50 rounds, and then he'd get his head out of his foxhole and see what was going on, and then he'd call me for 50 more. And we would keep moving along in these squares as the Marines advanced, not firing out ahead of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you were pretty accurate in getting inside that little grid?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Once in a while you'd make a mistake, but that's called what they call enemy fire or something. You read about that all the time.
Oh, friendly fire.
Friendly fire,
Right.
yeah. Because you had when you're firing for support of the Marines, you use I think like a 2,400 foot velocity shell or something, and we had 3,600 to fire at aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
So, but every once in a while you put a 3,600 in by mistake, and the shell would go clear on over the island and land on the other side. And somebody would say, "They're firing on us." It would happen once in a while, but
Okay.
not very often.
Okay. And
You
so.
tried to watch as best you could.
Uh-huh. And so he radioed you with.
Yeah.
Okay.
He'd call for 50 rounds on my, I'm on grid so and so and so and so. Then every once in a while he'd call for maybe 50 rounds on his position.
Mm-hmm.
He'd put his head down his foxhole and we'd fire at him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the Japs would be all around him. Because you could hear when he on the radio, you could hear him. You could hear the Japanese hollering in the background.
Could you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were stationed. We did that for quite a while till the island was probably 60 or 70% secured.
So here you're talking weeks or days or weeks, months?
Oh, how long was the engagement?
I don't know. I think it was pretty long.
Yeah, it was over a month.
Okay.
So we were there. We were doing this probably 3 or 4 weeks, and then they sent us on picket duty up north, up by Japan.
Okay. What did that mean?
Well, we were on radar picket duty. You were assigned. The bombers would be bombing Japan, of course, from Saipan.
Mm-hmm.
They were flying over and back, and you'd be out there in case one of them crashed or something to pick them up.
Okay.
And you were also radar picket duty because you had your radar. You'd warn the Japanese, or when the Japanese sent a plane up, you'd tell the fleet that there's any enemy aircraft in the area and that sort of thing.
Okay.
It was just a defense sort of a thing.
Mm-hmm. 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 Did you ever have to go pick anybody up? Any Japanese pilots that crashed?
No,
Mm-hmm.
but the B-29s in the daytime, with the B-29s coming back from Japan, they'd buzz us once in a while.
Uh-huh.
With the B-29, they'd bring it right down on the water, like 15, 20 feet off the water.
Uh-huh.
And they'd fly over us to try to get us wet because there'd be all this moisture
wow,
coming,
yeah.
prop wash coming up.
Sure.
But they do that once in a while.
Uh-huh.
And then one night we had a enemy bogey. I think the range was like 150 miles, something like that. So I was on gun watch up in the main battery directory that night, and they had this enemy bogey. So we went to a tent. We went to GQ and manned it, and pretty quick CIC, that Combat Information Center, called us and said that they had lost the enemy bogey, that he had disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So we secured from general quarters, and everybody went back to bed. We were sitting there playing pinochle
Mm-hmm.
under the director. And all of a sudden you could hear you could hear engines. I said, my gosh, I think I hear engines. So I cranked the hatch open on the directory. You could look out, and I says, my God, it's the Japanese Betty. The dang thing dropped a torpedo on us.
Oh my God.
But the torpedo went under us. He dropped it too close. The torpedo took its depth under the ship. You could see the wake cut right through the ship. So the Betty flew off into the horizon. We just said goodbye to it.
That was a close one.
And then we were assigned to go back to Iwo to resume battle state, fire, or some station or something we were going. And we were sailing back to Iwo, and the command or the officer of the deck wanted to take some pictures of the island.
Mm-hmm.
So we steamed in close to the north end of the island called I think it's called Catano Point or something.
Okay.
And so he's going to get these pictures for his little scrapbook he was making. And we got too close to the island. There was a 6-inch shore battery there that was active. And it opened fire on us. And it hit us with 3 rounds, I think.
Uh-huh.
You know, pretty near sunk us.
Yeah.
'Cause after it punched out, it flooded the forward engine room, the forward fire room, killed 11 guys.
Oh my gosh.
It was just, you know,
Yeah.
the ship was, we thought we were going to sink, but they managed to get the thing patched up. But we had collision pads which looked like mattresses.
Okay.
We tied them around the outside of the ship over the holes and shored up the inside with planking and pumped the water out.
And it pumped the water out. Okay. Okay.
So we managed to keep it about 6 inches from sinking.
That was close.
Yeah, it was. Anyway, they got it patched back up, and then we came back to the United States and we went back to San Francisco, back to Marion Naval Shipyard, and they repaired the ship.
Okay, how long were you there?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably. I remember the ship was made in Bath, Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some guys from Bath Ironwork come aboard
Did they?
when we were in. They flew them out to Pearl Harbor.
Uh-huh.
They came aboard and surveyed the damage.
Uh-huh.
When we got back to Mare Island, all the equipment that we needed was sitting on the dock there for us.
Uh-huh.
They'd gotten the superstructure. We had to have the forward torpedo tubes and a bunch of things had to be replaced.
Okay.
Because the thing it hit us right on the starboard quarterdeck,
Mm-hmm.
right by number 1 stack.
Okay. Is that the picture of your
That's
ship?
the picture of the ship there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it pretty much destroyed that whole section in the middle of the ship. So they had to replace the stack and the searchlight platforms and all of it. But that stuff they got that done. I think it took about 70 days to repair it.
Wow. Oh, so you were in San Francisco all that time?
No, they sent us home. Sent half the crew home.
Oh.
So I had a 30-day leave.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah. My poor old brother was in the infantry, in the 76th Infantry, and he left before I did. And he got home once for 4 days. He said every time he got a letter from Mother, I had either been home, coming home, or was leaving home, because I'd been with all this transferring. After the Navy. Every time I went through. When I was in Chicago, I was home. When I was in Gulfport, Mississippi, I went back to Chicago. I was home. Then here I was. I'd only been overseas. I thought I was going overseas till the war was over, and it was only we left in November, and I was back in April.
So he's a little jealous.
Yeah, he says, oh my gosh, every time I turn around, he's coming home. So anyway, I'm home then.
Great.
Then we went back to Mare Island, got aboard the ship, got the thing reconditioned. We had to go take our sea trials. Then we were assigned to the USS, I think it was the new Wasp or the new Hornet, one of the aircraft carriers. We escorted that back overseas and back to Iwo. They were getting ready for the invasion of Japan then.
Mm-hmm.
Iwo was just, the thing was, it's a little atoll. And it was just full of ships, there was, all these guys in the Army were being transferred from Europe for the invasion of Japan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we went up to bombard Japan for the pre-invasion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we went back to Japan, and we were all with the 3rd Fleet or whatever it was. I think it was either the 3rd or 5th Fleet. Then.
Okay.
For the pre-invasion forces for Japan. This was in July.
Okay. July 45 now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were getting ready to. We were bombarding this beach, getting ready to invade. I think it was. I've forgotten the name of the beach. It's not Nagoya or Nagasaki or one of those towns. They get the kind of history's kind of got kind of foggy with me a little bit.
Okay.
But anyway, we were bombarding this beach, and I remember they were discussing. You'd hear them discussing this year invasion plans. They were in estimating we would lose about 50,000 men in the invasion.
So you knew that.
Oh,
You knew that
yeah.
going in. Who would tell you that?
That's just, we would sit there, we'd go into these meetings with this beachhead with all these squares on it. They plotted out, and they were plotting the invasion. You, up in CIC, you sit there and talk about, they had all these maps and everything laying there, you just look at it. They said they were, so that was the general plan.
But they would be very frank about how many people they thought would die.
Yeah, you know, in the meantime, they dropped the atom bomb.
Okay.
When all of a sudden the war was over.
Yeah.
So we went back, they sent us back in, and we talked to pick up the USS Detroit, which is an old four-stacker cruiser, to escort it back to Tokyo, because they wanted the old Detroit there for the surrender ceremonies. When we went back in and we talked, the thing was empty.
Really? All those ships were gone?
It all went home.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were back to the old Detroit, back to, for the surrender ceremonies in Japan.
So how did you hear, Fay, about the surrender? Do you remember the minute you heard that Japan had surrendered?
Yeah, it was on the radio.
It was on the radio. The ship radio.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we went back to Tokyo in, I think it was about the 28th or 29th of August, before the surrender, to escort Detroit into Tokyo Harbor. You know, when you go into Tokyo Harbor, they made the Japanese put white bed sheets over all the gun emplacements.
Oh.
In Tokyo Harbor, you can see the hills were just covered with white bed sheets.
Really?
You know,
That was neat.
of course, we'd go on liberty in Japan before the the surrender wasn't quite official yet, but they'd make us carry a .45 when we go ashore.
Did they? Yeah. Well, yeah.
In the Japanese, every time they see a plane go over, they'd run.
Did they?
You know,
They were scared.
but they were pretty. They were surprisingly friendly.
Did you have a lot of interactions with the Japanese people?
Yeah, we would talk to them. Yeah. They just seemed to tolerate us like that was the way it was going to be. I was always surprised.
There's no animosity.
Didn't seem to be a great amount. No.
So they tried to speak a little English. You used sign language.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can talk to somebody without knowing what you're talking about. I remember we went into the Imperial Hotel. I think it was the Imperial. It was near in downtown Tokyo, and cigarettes were the currency.
Okay.
Because a pack of cigarettes cost us a nickel. You know, and they were worth 15 yen in Japanese money at that particular time. Of course, it got worse afterward. But I remember we went into the Imperial Hotel. They asked what we'd like. We said we'd like some beer. They said, "What kind would you like?" We said, "Well, Schlitz beer would be fine." And by gosh, they came up with Schlitz beer. All they ever did that.
Where they got that?
I don't know how they acquired that, but I was absolutely amazed that the Japanese were that.
Must have been a little black market or something going on. Yeah.
So anyway, we had
So did you barter for anything that you brought home?
Yeah, I had a bunch of stuff, but I've long lost it. I had some kimonos and stuff. You know, you'd buy stuff off people.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
Anyway,
I think I had, and I gave a lot of it away. Because I had some jewel boxes and lacquered things. Anything made in Japan wasn't very substantial anyway. All the Japanese stuff was pretty much junk. I had some shoes and I had some rifles and stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my dad came home with a big sword.
Anyway,
Stuff like that.
But stuff was, everything was bought with cigarettes.
So did you do any R&R in Japan? Did you get off to any other towns or?
Went to Tokyo. We were in Sasebo Naval Shipyard. So we'd go to Yokohama in Tokyo. Yokohama was a city about the size of Detroit in population. And there was about 3 buildings left standing. They burned them all down.
Wow.
Because the incendiary bombs would just burn everything. You could stand downtown Tokyo or Yokohama and see the mountains. All the town was gone. All the houses, everything burned out.
So where were the people living?
In the sewers and gutters and just everywhere.
Wow.
And it snowed a little bit when we were there. I felt it was.
So it was real hardship. They were.
Oh yeah.
Obviously no heat,
No, they had very little of anything.
Food, water.
Yeah. Only what we would give them. So they tried to 'Cause I remember, people would, the civilians would sell anything for cigarettes. You could buy the clothes off of a person with a pack of cigarettes if you wanted to fool around with them. I remember that one girl, we bought the baby's kimono and a bunch of stuff, just haggling with her. And we finally got all done, we gave her the pack of cigarettes and gave her clothes back.
Yeah. That was nice, yeah. Yeah.
Couldn't do that.
Sad.
Yeah.
Sad. And of course, the government could do nothing for the people, I
No.
suppose.
The government's almost inoperative.
Yeah. And you guys were all living on the ship.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would go in and off. We were anchored out in Tokyo Harbor. We had to take a ship, the whaleboat back. Tokyo Harbor's an immense place.
Is it?
Yeah, about 50 miles across, if I remember right.
Oh my word.
It was big,
Uh-huh.
almost like an inland sea.
Uh-huh. And so all the American ships are just all lined up there.
Yeah, because when we went for the surrender, we had to go in there and sweep. We had to escort minesweepers in to sweep because we had mined the thing so heavy you couldn't even fish in it. So we had to get all those mines out there so we could get the MacArthur and his crew back in there so they had to surrender.
Was that your job, Fay?
We were just to escort these minesweepers, just to make sure nobody fired out.
Okay. So on a day-to-day basis, then, did you have a lot to do? Or
No, nothing.
It was boring.
Nah, just
What'd you guys do?
just
Play
You know,
cards?
well, in the Navy, when you don't have anything to do, you chip paint. So that's what we did. We chip paint, painted the ship.
Okay.
I could never figure that out.
They had an endless supply of paint, huh?
I don't know where they got all the
Gray
paint, but
paint.
they had lots of great paint. But anyway, we painted a lot.
Uh-huh.
You keep your equipment going. You do some maintenance, and you stand there on gun watch. When you're on gun watch, you got 4 hours to stand there and watch.
Fun.
But but then it was quite a chore to go ashore because we were anchored out the bay, maybe 5 or 6 miles from shore. You had to get in the motor whaleboat, go to shore. Took about an hour or so to get ashore. Half the guys that come back in the tank, you're about half drunk, and it's a wonder nobody ever drowned because you're in this motor whaleboat in this rough water, trying to get on the ship. Everything's going up and down. You got to come up a rope ladder. But
And then, like you said, after
everybody always made it. I could never figure out how. And there'd be other ships in the area. You'd get in a motor whaleboat and try to go barter something with somebody. See if you had something you could trade for something you could use.
But you didn't ever have any food to trade with the people.
Well, we always had lots of food, but we had sea rations, and we'd steal the rations out of the life rafts. They had the spam and stuff in the life raft. The Japanese loved that.
I bet they did.
Yeah. So anyway, you always had cigarettes. We had cigarettes like you'd buy cigarettes by that carton.
Right.
Or by that. I had a case of cigarettes that I had bought. A big case of cigarettes for money because I had to carry my money in my gas bag. The gas mask bag, took the gas mask out and you stuffed that full of yen because you had money all over the place.
Because it was basically worthless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took a lot of money to buy something.
Right. And so you traded. They give you the kimono. You give them a bunch of cigarettes. What are they going to do with the cigarettes?
I don't know.
They were trading them for something else.
They'd wrap them up in paper, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
They use cigarettes to buy stuff.
Yeah. So like you say, it was the currency.
Yeah,
They weren't just sitting there smoking them.
No, they didn't smoke cigarettes.
No. But everybody in the Navy smoked?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Cigarettes were a nickel a pack.
And did you smoke?
A little bit.
Uh-huh.
But the Navy made smoking almost impossible anyway.
Oh, why is that?
Well, you had any pockets. Your dress uniform, you got no place to carry cigarettes.
Okay.
You can't carry them you'd roll them up. And in the Navy, you'd roll them up in your shoes. It was just a mess. I smoked occasionally, but not much.
Other than the time that your ship the Terry was hit, did you feel in danger during the war? Were there other situations where you felt?
Yeah, you're under air attack a couple of times, but combat was always it was such a short period of time. It was over hardly before it started. And most of your time was spent there just steaming around. I thought, during after we got hit, I went back, and then I was transferred up to the 40 millimeter gun directory up on number 2 stack, The 40 millimeter is a big quad gun, sits down here, and the director's up here. It runs the gun follows the director, and it's got some optics in it and stuff that, you know, you'd run that thing and shoot at targets and stuff. And I thought, what an awesome responsibility to give a kid. This your 40 millimeter gun. It's kind of like an arcade game, the thing was.
Yeah, yeah. Because you're 19 or 20?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really something. I always remember at one of our reunions afterward we went to, and the captain was there. Captain Lee, his name was. And he said, everybody called me the old man. He says, I was 28 at the time.
You get a little skewed, huh?
Yeah.
So what do you think, how was the morale in your
Good.
unit?
Oh, yeah. We were a pretty close-knit group. Because we still meet every year, every reunion. There are not many of us left, but I'm going to a reunion here in September.
Do you always have those at the same place?
No.
Where's it going to be this year?
We're going to Ohio.
Okay.
Stowe, Ohio.
So you move it around?
Oh, yeah, we've been to Stowe, we've been to Baton Rouge, we've been to because there's a destroyer down there at Baton Rouge on the river. And we've been to Bath, Maine, we've been to New Jersey, and we've been various, I haven't been to all of them, I've been to maybe 6 or 8. We've been to Independence, Missouri a couple of times.
And now when you say have a reunion, is that all the guys that were on your ship?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or what's left of them.
Yeah. And how many originally were on your ship?
Around, I think the complement was 350, something like that.
Oh, 350?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
There's probably 25 or 30 of us left.
Oh, good. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. So did you write home a lot when you were?
Oh, yeah. We always had mail, you know. Transfer mail back and forth, because we when you're underway like that for any length of time, you take on supplies and stuff. You come alongside another ship and pass a line across and transfer stuff back and forth over a road.
Okay. So there were some Navy men in ships that's just what they did. They
Supply ships, yeah.
Okay, supply ships. Okay.
Like when we were operating off the coast of Japan, we were there for I don't know, 3 or 4 months. It seemed like, you know, you never saw land. But you'd be constantly supplied by ships, transports that come alongside, fuel, oil. You'd transfer your fuel at sea and everything else.
Did you ever have any entertainment, any USO shows, movies?
We had movies. You know, you'd swap movies with different ships and stuff.
Okay.
You'd have movies on the fantail, but you couldn't do that during the war because after the war we could, because you couldn't show a light at night.
Right. So why don't you tell me a little bit then about how the war ended for you, how you got discharged and all that?
Well,
from being out there off the coast.
we came back to they wanted to decommission the ship. So sent us back to San Pedro Harbor. We were tied up to the lumber company. I think it was the Patent Benton Lumber Company or something. We were decommissioning the ship. We had to seal all the hatches with plastic. They had some kind of a plastic gel they put over everything.
Okay.
So, to try to preserve the ship, put dehumidifiers in it and all this sort of thing. And we decommissioned it there. What was that? April of '46.
Again, this is in San Francisco?
This was in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles,
Yeah.
Okay.
So we put the ship ashore there, and of course, then in April I had enough points. I came home.
And you got points by length of service?
Yeah, if you were married, you had points. If you had children, you had points. If you had length of service, you had points. It was kind of a complicated thing.
Okay.
Being single, I didn't have too many points, and so consequently, I was one of the last ones off.
And so you finished up in Los Angeles, and they sent you on a train back to Grand Rapids?
Yeah, they said, where'd they discharge me? I don't know. I think they sent us back to Great Lakes, if I remember right.
Okay. And where is this Great Lakes?
Great Lakes Naval Training Station in Chicago.
In Chicago, okay. Okay, so how did you transition then to civilian life?
Well, we came home. And I started back to college.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I did, I thought, well, I'll join the Navy Reserve because that pays $75 a month or something, and I give me some college money. So I joined the Naval Reserve. And my dad started a plating company.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working nights at the plating company, going to college in the day, and I was working both ends against the middle, so I quit college and went to work at the plating company.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I quit the Navy Reserve. I didn't want any more to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then in
But you were using the GI Bill to pay your tuition at junior college?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So then, but I didn't go there very long because I was working the night shift at the crazy factory.
Mm-hmm.
We were up here back where the Marathon station is now here at
Oh
Forest
yeah.
Hills.
Uh-huh.
That was and then then I had we had the factory, and then we built the factory down. We moved down here, and I got married.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we were living over in a little house next to my folks, and the Navy came along again.
Mm-hmm.
They said that I was supposed to report to Detroit to get a plane ticket to Tokyo.
Thought I was done with Tokyo.
Yeah, I quit the Navy Reserve. They said, well, you didn't quit. I said, well, I did. But you didn't. Well, so anyway, what they did, you could quit by just a letter of resignation, but the commanding officer never accepted any letters of resignation because to keep his billet in Grand Rapids, he had to keep his enrollment up.
Oh.
So he had all these people on this enrollment that never had anything to do with the Navy Reserve.
Oh.
So I'm married, got one child, and I'm back in the Navy,
Uh-huh.
going to Korea.
Oh my God, you're like, what's happening?
So, I'd just gotten out of the hospital. I'd had some kind of like a polio infection in my back, so I couldn't do anything. So they sent me to Great Lakes for a medical observation.
Uh-huh.
They had me in a barracks. Now one side of the barracks was a beer joint, and the other side was the chow hall. That was all I could do,
Yeah.
was eat and drink.
Uh-huh.
And I think I gained almost 20 pounds while I was down there. I came home, I was so fat my shoes wouldn't fit. I said, this has got to stop. Got to get this weight off.
Yeah.
So anyway, they said, well, Johnson, you're in limbo here. We'll give you a permanent duty station in San Francisco with a pack rat fleet, Pacific Reserve Fleet.
Okay.
So I went to. I said, well, then your wife could go live with you. So we moved to San Francisco. So we lived out there for. I said, I don't belong here. Geez, the time went by, and I kept trying. I made application for discharge, trying to plead my case. That the Navy didn't hear me, and they wouldn't hear anything about it. We came home in November of whatever it was. I went down to see Jerry Ford. He was our congressman.
Mm-hmm.
I said, here's my trouble, Jerry. I said, I'm not supposed to be in this Navy, and I don't want anything to do with this outfit. I said, I don't belong here. So I've been in here for, a year, just hanging here in limbo.
Well, yeah.
And the wife is pregnant. She's having another child, so that's really one of the reasons why we came home. And he said, well, just a minute, Fay. I said, I'll see what I can do. He calls me. He said, hey, Bill, he's got a problem. So he tells Bill his problem, and he hangs up, and I said, who's Bill? He said, oh, that's the Admiral Van Meter, Bureau of Naval Personnel.
Uh-huh.
I said, well, that's great. He said, go back to San Diego. Our ship was stationed out of San Diego. So go back to San Diego, make application for discharge. This is in December. So it's all straightened out. So I went back to San Diego, made this application for discharge, and they transferred me back up to San Pedro, to minesweepers. The USS Chief, I think the name of it was.
Okay.
And I reported aboard the Chief. There's nothing there. There's no superstructure, no nothing. Just a hull. They're refitting it. So they transferred me. They said, well, you can get a billet over here at the Long Beach Naval Shipyard. So I'm there from November to April. And I go back down to San Diego. I said, this is ridiculous. Go back down to San Diego. I said, how come? I said, I'm assigned to this USS Chief. I said, and I'm supposed to be getting a discharge. And what's going on? They said, you idiot. I said, we've processed thousands of those. There's only one or two that were ever approved. So that's darn funny. They said, well, what's your name? I said, Fay Johnson. They said, oh, so we discharged you last December. We sent a radiogram to the ship.
Oh
I said, well, there's no radio on that ship. I said, I'm not the only one on it.
Oh my God.
They said, well, you make you go over here to this barracks and make the application discharge. I said, go over to this barracks, my butt, I'm going home. I got my car and came home.
Well, that's the craziest thing I ever heard.
So then the Navy says, well, you can't leave. You're overdrawn your leave by 90 days or some doopy thing. I said, just give me a break. I'm out of here. I don't want anything to do with you people. And I think about a year later, they finally gave me $500 or something.
That is a goofy story.
It is.
That is goofy.
I didn't belong in the Navy. I didn't want nothing to do with it. we laugh.
But it screwed up a couple more years of your life.
Yeah. But it was interesting. It's hard on the wife.
Well, yeah.
Because we were living in Navy housing. We lived in the city dump in San Francisco and down in Navy housing, old plasterboard, it'd be like a plasterboard sort of, kind of some little house that we rented.
Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah. We went back a year afterward, took the kids back there to show them where we lived, and just the ghetto.
Fay, why don't you tell me? Do you think what lasting effects you think the war had on you, or being in the Navy?
Well, basically, our whole generation kind of grew up in the war, really.
Mm-hmm.
We went in a kid and came out a man.
Mm-hmm.
It was I think all of us would pretty much agree on that. It was a great learning experience. I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I thought it was the greatest adventure of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the discipline that you learned there?
Well, I was very fortunate to be assigned to a destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little discipline on the destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're all family.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't. I don't think I ever wore my dress blues
Mm-hmm.
or dress white. I remember my white uniforms. I think they're down in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
They're yellow, but I never wore them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because you wore dungarees. We were what we called the dungaree Navy.
Yeah.
Blue jeans and with the uniform of the day.
Oh, was it?
Just pretty much, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You'd wear your dress blues when you go ashore, but
Mm-hmm.
while you're on ship, you wore dungarees.
Mm-hmm.
I never wore whites or anything else on the ship.
Mm-hmm. 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 Any negatives you think of from the war?
Well, you didn't like being told what to do every blessed moment. I think that goes against all of our grain pretty much. That's not the philosophy of the United States. We believe that a person's freedom, they should, you have a certain amount of inalienable rights that you can, you've earned those. But you realize that there was the right way and the Navy way, and that's just you just try to adapt to it. If you didn't adapt to it, you're in all kinds of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
There was every once in a while somebody that couldn't adapt to it.
Mm-hmm. Did some guys in your ship get into trouble?
Oh, sure, there's always somebody in trouble.
And then they throw them in the brig, or what do they do?
Yeah. Yeah, there was a little lock up back in the after steering where you'd lock somebody up for doing some screwy deal.
Yeah. Yeah. What might they do?
Mostly drunk.
Okay.
Once in a while they'd fight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think drinking was a problem?
Well, some people was, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Sure it was.
Uh-huh. More time and opportunity than they normally would have
They got
had.
in some awful scrapes.
Mm-hmm.
They went like we were along the beach. I remember we'd be the guys who were on Liberty. They'd go over and they'd get in the wrong section of town. And we had them what we called the zoot suiters.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the duckbill haircuts, and they were always, you have to. They'd carry bicycle chains with them to fight and stuff.
Oh.
They were
Kind of tough guys, huh?
Yeah, they were the rough neighborhood.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
The dives that the Navy would get into, like Vallejo. I might remember there was a bar in downtown Vallejo, Mare Island. And this guy come back, and he said, "Oh, I just met this wonderful girl. She's the most beautiful thing you ever saw." He says, "We're going to get married." He says, and I said, "Well, while you're sober, maybe we should go take a look at her." So we went in there. We went into the bar. He says, "This whatever her name was, Mary's here." "Yeah, she's right over there." He looked at Mary and said, "Oh, is that Mary?" There's this woman without any front teeth, It's just hilarious.
Get new perspective in the morning, huh?
I think the best thing we can do is just get out of here. Just those goofy experiences.
Yeah, yeah. And now I know, Fay, that you have done a lot with veterans groups since in your time since the service. Why don't you tell me about what you've been involved with?
Well, I've been an active member in the American Legion of Lowell. We're kind of a kind of a dying group, but,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're hanging in there.
Mm-hmm.
We used to be a very active post. We owned the bowling alley in Lowell.
Okay,
But
and what,
now, we sold the bowling alley. We've got Legion, we've got what we call a Veterans Hall out on Alden Nash south of town with the VFW.
okay,
And so we,
and so I know you said you marched in parades, you
Yeah.
had meetings, what were some of your goals, what was the purpose of your group?
just to kind of keep together.
Social mostly?
Yeah. You know, we're probably one of the more solid posts around. We don't have to raise money for anything.
Mm-hmm. Do you raise money for anything?
No, we don't
No.
have to.
Okay,
We-
so you're pretty much social,
yeah.
and,
It's just we get together and talk about things. We're right now we're working on probably going to get some money for the grotto they're remodeling over at the Veterans Facility.
okay,
We'll put some
okay,
money up
so
on
you
that.
do some fundraising
Yeah,
for that?
you know, we help various groups out once in a while. When we kind of dole our money out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do people come to you for money?
Oh, sure, all the time.
Uh-huh, and you
Yeah.
tell them we don't raise funds?
Well, we'll give somebody a couple $100 every once in a while if they've got a good enough cost.
Okay, okay.
We operate on we're old enough that we're not into the new philosophy where it takes not hundreds of dollars, it takes thousands.
Yeah, right, exactly, exactly. So do you have guys from Korea and Vietnam in your
Yeah.
group too?
We've got some Vietnam.
Mhm.
And some, I'm Korean, both wars, and
Right.
Rich Berry's in Korea, and then some Vietnam, and
Mm-hmm.
some Desert Storm. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you've met some
Yeah.
new people that way too.
Yeah, we get a few once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, you don't have the big pool of veterans that you had from World War II,
Mm-hmm.
because you know there's fewer people involved.
Yeah. Anything? So I just see my little note here about the GI Bill. So you really didn't take advantage much of the GI Bill.
Well, yeah, I kind of did.
You did. You do.
Well, the GI Bill had a lot of other benefits to it besides going to college.
Okay.
One, you could fly.
Okay.
So we went out to the airport and took flying lessons.
Oh.
On the
Okay.
GI Bill rights, you could take a plane, go anywhere you wanted to.
Okay. Good for you.
Yeah, we'd get it. We had an airport here at one time.
Mm-hmm. So you actually flew a plane.
Yeah.
Where
yeah.
would you fly then?
Anywheres.
Just around for fun, or you had a destination?
Well, we'd go down to Portland for a cup of coffee, Lake Odette, or Owasso for a cup of coffee, and we rent this plane. A bunch of them went down to New Orleans one time
Uh-huh.
with a little bunch of planes.
So you didn't have to pay for the gas or the.
Nothing.
You could just use the plane.
Yeah.
You think that was safe having you guys drive those planes around?
Sure.
Because you knew you'd been properly trained.
Well, yeah. I bet yes. It's like driving a car.
Yeah.
I eventually bought an airplane.
Did you?
Oh yeah.
Uh huh.
I had a little. I think I bought an airplane. I paid $1,500 for an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Bought a Cessna 140. We kept that here on the airplane.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
We had a hangar over here, and we had,
Uh-huh.
I don't know, 5 or 6 airplanes on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And we bought some military craft. We bought an old Tim and a BT-13, and
Mm-hmm.
you know,
So that was you personally, or the
Yeah.
guys in the Legion?
no, but this is personal here.
Yeah.
The Legion had nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
So you know,
Yeah. Good. So you took advantage of the GI Bill that way.
oh yeah, GI Bill had a lot of outside benefits to it.
Did they?
Yes, because when we wanted to, we had this planing company. And we needed some equipment,
Mm-hmm.
so you could get the war surplus equipment with a GI Bill.
Oh.
So we could bid on this equipment. We needed some buffing jacks. So we were in the plating. We needed these buffing jacks. So we bid on some buffing jacks down in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't see any of this stuff. You bid on, there were 3 of them on the list. So we bid on the 3. We bid like, I don't know, I forgot what it was, $1,000 or something
Mm-hmm.
for these 3 buffing jacks. So we went down there to get them. And they said, well, what are you going to load this stuff on? I said, well, we're going to put this here in our trailer. You can't get that stuff in your trailer. You bought everything in this building. There were some 3 or 4 die casting machines and a buffing jacks and some punch presses, just a darndest bunch of stuff.
Uh-huh.
You know, so we had a bunch of equipment.
Fun. So when you say we, it was you and your dad and your brother
Yeah,
in the
my-
plating business?
Yeah. the 3 of
Okay.
us,
And what was it called?
Pardon?
What was the name of your
It
company?
was called Ace Plating.
Okay. Good.
And we sold out to Lax Industries in I think, probably in the early '70s, something like that.
Okay,
Because we'd built the golf course, we had the golf course and the plating company going both.
yeah,
We built the golf course, tried to keep the help busy in the summertime, because back in the '40s and early '50s, General Motors shut down every summer for
Mhm.
3 months,
yeah,
because that was the standard procedure. Where they had model changeovers, they'd lay everybody off and hire them all back in the fall.
mhm,
So we thought, well, the golf course gives the help something to do.
mhm,
So we had the golf course, we had this little 18-hole golf course called
Yeah.
Hickory Hills, and the plating company.
yeah, good. Okay, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you feel you should say?
Well, no, except that I feel real sorry for the veterans today as they're so much ignored.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, you know, and I've always felt, I've had a little animosity with the VFW because they gotta be veteran of foreign wars. You know, all of us just went where we were told to go.
right,
We were, you know, everybody was, they went in, was taking the chance of being on the front line. There's very few people that were actually in combat, I suppose, compared to the amount of guys that were in there. But most everybody was doing what they were told to do.
right.
And it's not fair to say one's more of a veteran than the other.
So you take exception with the word foreign?
Yeah.
That,
I think anybody that went in the service,
right,
is a serviceman. I don't care where he went.
right,
He went to, if he spent all his time in Saipan or Guadalcanal, or if he spent it all in the United States, he was doing his duty.
right, right.
You
Good
know,
point.
and I think we were all very appreciative of all the mothers and everything else and all the things they did. I never really quite realized what they went through until our grandson went in the Navy. He was going to be a SEAL. I thought, oh Lord, poor old mother. But there was just the two of us, and we were both in the service.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, like in Private Ryan.
right, right.
You know, I just
Yeah,
you
it was hard for your mom,
It
yeah.
really was. It was really a lot harder than I ever thought it was. I never imagined what she went through till afterward.
Right, then you appreciated
Yeah.
that.
Oh, I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
You know, people are, they couldn't have been nicer. It's too bad. That, you know, the Vietnam guys really got a bad rap.
Yeah,
You know, and the whole, I don't know what they did over there or anything else, but they didn't want to be there. I know that.
that's right, exactly,
And don't condemn what they did because
That's right.
until you've been there yourself.
that's exactly right. Okay, good, well, this is great, Fay, I appreciate it.
Okie doke.
Show me a little bit, are these some pictures that you,
Yeah, these, my scrapbook is kind of bad, but this is the gunnery crew here.
oh, okay, maybe we can put this here, why don't you hold it up in front of the lens here, Okay, there's a picture of your gunnery crew.
That's the ordnance department, torpedomen, fire crew, bowmen, and gunner's mates.
Uh-huh,
I think that's me here on this corner here.
oh, yeah, very nice,
These are just the pictures of the ship.
uh-huh,
These are our uniform of the day.
okay,
That's the way we dress.
very casual,
Well, yeah. These are just a bunch of guys.
uh-huh, uh-huh. But it's all fond memories.
Yeah, and we were these are the pictures. This is a twin 40 millimeter gun here.
Mm-hmm. Just draw this a little bit like this, I think.
This is the director. Those are our radar antennas on our director. This is the director here. The director sits up on top of the ship, up at the top, way up on top there.
Okay.
That little square thing on top there.
Right here?
That's the main battery gun.
Okay.
Yep, that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 40 millimeter gun director here.
Okay.
It's got some compass. It's got some not compass, but they're spinning wheels. So when you turn it, they're like gyros. You know.
Okay.
They would, and then some mirrors and stuff, and you had a little reticle in there, you a little round thing, and you could see your target in there. And as you moved it, it indicated, you could set the range, and it indicated where the shell had to be in the air to hit the airplane, theoretically.
Wow. Yeah, that's great.
These are just some of the guys.
Yeah, fun.
This is Iwo Jima, that's Mount Suribachi.
Uh-huh.
This, you can see when you're firing your shell casings laying on the ground. This is Mount Suribachi here.
Okay.
These are a couple of guys we picked up in a life raft.
What were they doing out there?
They'd crashed.
Oh, boy.
This was.
Well, they were happy to see you.
Yeah, this is an old landing barge that something had happened to it. I forgot what. This is a picture of another destroyer. This is not us. This is another one. These are just some of the guys.
Yeah. Neat.
These are pictures of Iwo Jima.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, that's a good view of it. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the looking up at the tobacco. Just pictures.
Yeah.
These are pictures taken in, I don't know, this is taken probably Santa Anita racetrack, I think.
Oh, okay. So you got a little time off for that.
These were taken in Japan. This is part of downtown Yokohama.
Uh-huh.
There wasn't much there.
Uh-huh.
We had to wear uniforms that we wear our whites a little bit.
Yeah.
We had to carry our 45s with us.
Okay.
These are just pictures of Japan.
Yeah.
You know, pictures. But the people, this is the big naval base with Saipan. It's all pretty much ruins.
Oh, yeah.
But that was, yeah.
Good.
These are all my papers. This is my pictures.
Oh, okay. We'll put the picture here in front. Very nice. Very handsome. Oh, that's great.
This is another photograph of the ship.
Oh, yeah.
These are the guys, and these are the officers, and these are what they look like now.
Oh, okay. Here's a picture of the little reunion group. Good. Well, you, Fay, in about a month or so, I guess, you're going to get a DVD in the mail of our interview here today.
Okay.
I'm going to turn this off.
Okay.
And